Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our August 2014 meeting of the Policy Leadership Group for the Transportation for Economic Development Project. We began this project in May of 2013. You have been faithfully meeting since then, and we can appreciate that. Our charge at that time was to think about a transportation system that would serve a large and highly diverse county that has both rural aspects and major city in the region, to serve a county that's the job center for the region, to serve a county that contains a lot of rural areas, to serve a county that has major ports and is a major crossroads, and that's growing both in population and businesses. And our challenge is to do that in the context of both today's economy and the economy which is emerging, and how to think about that. To meet that challenge, you have worked for the last 16 months in what has been described to me as an unprecedented level of cooperation between the cities and the county, HART, THEA, FDOT, the Planning Commission, MPO, ports, and other transportation entities. And there have been 4 working groups primarily in that. The Project Management Group, which comprised of an interdisciplinary group of engineers, planners, your economic development specialists, and they've worked very hard on identifying empirically the key economic spaces and the competitive sites that will be in the future, and determining the transportation needs of those sites in particular. We've also had a finance group that's looked at the various ways to fund projects. We have a communications group that's focused on how do we communicate and inform the public. And we have what we call the managers and administrators group, which are administrative executives, which have met monthly or more frequently to review this process. In the process, we've reanalyzed a lot of prior studies. We've done new analyses to try to understand transportation from an economic impact perspective, and we've engaged in a bit of public outreach early in the process with town hall meetings, various presentations, and then a variety of surveys which we presented the data to you. You've told us from the start that you wanted a very strong public conversation in this, and an in-depth conversation that's substantive with the community. We have done all this work to arrive at today where we can present you a proposal that provides that substantive conversation. And that's the work that many folks have done. And I do want to just take a moment to really acknowledge this tremendous extra effort that staff from all your agencies and other agencies have made on this. They've done their jobs and they've taken on this initial task. They worked till 10 or 11 at night. They work weekends. It's been a tremendous effort by very fine public servants to bring you a very quality product. Mr. Merrill is going to present to you in a moment the substance of the conversation that we're asking about, which we're calling an integrated mobility proposal, and he'll define those terms for you. After your conversation with him about this proposal, I will return and I'll present to you a process for the public conversation. We're really asking for one decision from you today, a consensual decision, that we can move forward with the public discussion and conversation process. That's the one direction we are asking of you today. You obviously may choose to do other items if you do, and you do. But that's the item I particularly would like to get guidance on before I leave today. So without further ado, to present to you the work of the last 16 months, Mr. Merrill.
Thank you, Herb. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. The issue of transportation and what we do about it will literally impact everything we do and everything we are here in Hillsborough County. It will impact our ability to keep existing jobs and to attract new ones. It will determine our ability to keep our families together and to keep them safe. And it will impact the precious quality of life that makes living here so special. That's why from the very beginning of this process, one we began over 12 months ago, we insisted on being thorough, open, and inclusive. Because if we don't get this right, if we don't do this right, we'll live with the consequences well into the future. Doing this right means making sure we hear from people all across the county, to listen to their concerns and their ideas, to answer their questions if we can, or to get the answers when we can't, to discuss the options we have and dismiss those that we don't. So far, there's a list of ideas, a menu of options that have been proposed which merit thoughtful consideration. These options, like the county itself, are many and varied. They connect communities and job centers, and they strike a balance, both geographically and by type of service. A backlog of road repaving needs and sidewalk safety projects span the county, and much-needed intersection and roadway improvements would add capacity to an overstressed and clogged system. Expansion and enhancement of our Metro Rapid bus service, along with new bus rapid transit, could lower cost of service sooner and relieve traffic congestion. Our community's principal business corridors are projected to host 370,000 jobs by the year 2040. Downtown Tampa to West Shore is one of the largest commercial districts in the southeast United States, with 170,000 jobs. Ensuring the continued competitive advantage of these business centers and of Tampa International Airport and our port and the greater USF area will lead to more jobs and prosperity for everyone. So early investment in fixed guideway transit system improvements could build ridership and make us competitive for federal investments. This would give us time to develop a long-term transit and land use strategy supporting light rail and other fixed guideway options. But we do not yet have a Hillsborough plan for transportation. And we won't have a plan until we know the people of Hillsborough have weighed in, we've done our due diligence, and we've examined all sources of funding beyond Hillsborough. The funding we currently have has been put to good use, but it is limited and insufficient to meet backlog projects and future transportation needs. So far, 50%, or about $450 million of the community investment tax, has paid for transportation projects. And about 43%, or $137 million, of the remaining CIT will go to transportation before the CIT expires. Many essential public safety projects, schools, water and sewer services, parks and libraries will also have been built by the CIT before it expires. But after all of these critical community investments are made, no additional CIT capacity remains. And gas taxes are a declining revenue source, and they're committed to maintaining what existing roads, sidewalks, and intersections and bridges that we can. So, with all of this in mind, the transportation plan that we create together as a community must measure up to 6 basic litmus tests. 1, it'll get us moving again, breaking the traffic log jams that threaten our jobs and our future. 2, it fixes what's broken, from roads that are in bad shape or need repaving to bridges that are in disrepair. 3, it's affordable, sustainable, equitable, and implementable. We should justify every tax dollar being asked for and be accountable for how it's spent. 4, it increases personal safety, from streets and highways to crosswalks and bike lanes. 5, it gives mobility to seniors and others who need it to maintain their freedom and their health. And 6, it enhances our quality of life. For attracting and retaining businesses also means creating safe, attractive, and livable communities for the workers. So over the coming months, we'll be reaching out to communities and groups throughout the county to draft a plan that measures up to all of these markers, using town halls, teletown halls, homeowners association meetings, business chamber meetings, and by soliciting ideas from the public by way of webpage and social media. And we'll keep reaching out until we have a plan that truly represents the special nature of Hillsborough County and the people who live here. Not a plan that's inherited or adapted from somewhere else, but one that's bred here, based here, and is focused on solutions here in Hillsborough, and will make us strong partners in regional transportation solutions. Not a plan that will reflect politics, but one grounded in sound policy and sound engineering. And we all agree that citizens should have a decision-making role in implementing that plan. For this reason, Hart's governance should continue to ensure the public interest. Any discussion of governance should wait until we have a transportation plan. It's time to have an honest conversation about transportation, one that's open, transparent, and one that reflects the best in all of us. This is a transformational moment in Hillsborough County. Job growth in the Tampa Bay region and in Hillsborough County is the strongest in the state as our business sector begins to recover from the recession. Our healthcare technology sector is brimming with potential to one day become a world-class engine of innovation and business generation. And we can be very proud of our high-caliber schools and universities. The cost of county government has declined 20% since 2007 without a loss of service. The crime rate has dropped precipitously. And we've begun to tackle and solve difficult social issues like homelessness and are redeveloping blighted and poverty-stricken pockets of the community. Whether we are able to capitalize on these successes and secure continued economic prosperity, competitive advantage, and quality of life for generations to come depends on decisions that we make right now as a community about strategic transportation investments. There's a single purpose for today's meeting: to begin an honest community conversation about transportation choices that residents believe are important. We're ready and determined to do just that. Thank you. And Herb, come back up. I'll take questions. And if there are questions, or Herb can begin to talk to you about the community engagement plan that we've developed, and we're all here to answer questions for you.
Actually have a question from Commissioner Higginbotham.
I'm sorry, Commissioner?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Marlowe. I've got a question came to my attention about this, I'm going to call it AECOM report, AECOM.
Right.
In your estimation, what is this report? And is it a summary? Is it a conclusion? And I was looking for a timeline as to when my office received it, and didn't see anything specifically where it came to my office.
Right. The report was something that we felt we needed to have done as we were building the proposals and options. There have been a number of studies and evaluations and reports that have been done over the past 2, 3, 4 years. Some of them were incomplete, some of them didn't go far enough. What we wanted was an assessment, an honest assessment, independent assessment of where we stand in terms of our preparedness and our ability to embark on transit solutions. All kinds of transit solutions, not just rail, bus, rapid transit, other fixed guideway solutions. So I would characterize, to answer your question, I would characterize the report as an assessment, a health checkup on where we are as a community. And the report in the executive summary indicates that currently, as we stand, under the criteria or the rules for obtaining federal grant money, there are some areas that we're deficient, primarily ridership, some land use decisions that we can change. But those are issues that are resolvable, and if we begin soon to address them, we can be eligible for and prepared for federal grant money. So it's not at all a statement that, you know, we are not a community that can become transit-oriented or that can have rail. It's simply an assessment of where we are today, the steps we need to take to be prepared.
Good. And as I read the report in detail today, it's what it seemed to me. There was no conclusion.
No.
There was nothing that said that this is a committee about a tax or this is a committee about rail. It was an overall conclusion as an outline before we take this to the public, because, you know, out of the rubble of 4 years ago, my insistence was to put this committee together. I'm not saying I'm taking credit for this, but I talked about that a great deal. I want to make sure that I'm not taking credit to those of us who are sitting here, but that I was insistent that this next step be community-driven. And that's what we've done here over the last year, is to assimilate the bits and pieces to go out and get the appropriate input. So when we go to whatever the next step is, that we have everybody participating. But again, I don't see this, and I wanted to make sure I had not misread something, as a conclusion, but as tools in the toolbox. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, and I don't know how many others have read this report, but I read it today, and I don't recall receiving it in my office. But where was it posted?
It's posted on the website. It was posted shortly after the media briefing that we had a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
The author of it is here, Ken Sislick from AECom, if you have any questions. We wanted to make him available, but...
What was his name?
Ken Sislick.
Okay, okay.
But, you know, I think you've characterized it properly, Commissioner, and so it's one of those things where you want to know what the facts are, you want to know what's your health today as a community for transit, and then you say, I don't know if I want to hear the answer, but we needed to know the answer, and the answer is not negative.
No, it's good information.
It's
and
good information.
Yeah, I'm not interrupting you.
No.
It's good information, and I hope everybody in the public reads it as we go forward here.
Right.
Can I ask, was the assessment that was done, though, did it take into consideration, I've asked Mr. Sislick the answer, the new criteria
Yes.
that has been established by FDA?
Right. Absolutely. And he can talk about that. It absolutely does, and that's really why the landscape has changed from where we were a few years ago, because the criteria for becoming eligible for grant money has changed. And to be competitive, we need to know now what steps do we need to take to be competitive when we're ready to go for grants. That's simply the question that was asked. Where are we today? What do we need to have to do, or what do we need to do to be prepared? And that's what he's given us.
Mr. Suarez?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Merrill, now, the AECom study, and I'm with Commissioner Higginbotham, I haven't seen it until after, of course, when you all posted it. That was not in conjunction with HART, because I don't think we had done, this was from the county's perspective to get an independent assessment. Mm-hmm. Is the person who did the study, is that what they do, is just transportation type studies? Because AECom is a huge corporation, does a lot of different things. And this was just a transit assessment look, because we weren't involved in it, correct? The HART board, I don't think, or the HART
board, but it was part of the group effort, which included all the agencies.
Yeah.
So,
if I could, Mr. Merrill, let me ask Ms. Egan about that. Could I, if I could bring her up real quick before you finish?
Sure.
I just want to ask her role in the AECom study.
Yeah. As Mr. Merrill's noting, and thank you for the question, Councilman, staff from various agencies participated in the project management group, and in May we did receive a presentation with Mr. Sislak in the audience after the study was concluded, sharing the findings and some of the information coming back from the study. So we did see it as part of the project management group. It was not something that HART had participated in scoping or taking out on the street, and it is distinct from the process that the federal grantee would go through. It is a foundational document that would go through, but it does not substitute what a grantee would have to go through to make some decisions on transit investments.
Okay, I just want to make sure, this is not something that we were intimately involved in on the AECom process. I just wanted to make sure of that.
no, but the consultant was part of the group back in 2010 during the development of the AA.
Mm-hmm.
So he went back and looked at all of the work that had been done, not just the AA, but he went back, I mean, he can speak for himself, but so it was a comprehensive study, including the AA, but he was part of that effort back during the prior attempt. So he had that perspective, but it was also, let's just take a fresh look, given the new criteria, where do we stack up? It's now 4 years later, things have changed, where do we stand? And it's not an indictment at all, it's just simply...
No, and the question was just whether or not we had participated as a group, and that's all. I just wanted to find out about that. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Berman?
Thank you. And I just want to make a few comments. your leadership on this obviously has been wonderful, and these comments today have been refreshing, especially for me. I think Commissioner Higginbotham really touched on it quite a bit, because we're moving from this governance conversation to the mobility conversation. We need to find out what the mobility solutions are before we can decide what the governance solutions are. And I think having this be a people-centric proposal will put us all at ease when we come back here and have to make any definitive decisions on what the solution will be, whether it be a referendum or whatever the solution is. But I think that putting the governance thing on the back burner for now is the right thing to do. It'll, of course, allow time for you all to work together, as I proposed at the HART board meeting. But I think repositioning our efforts to take this aggregated data out to the public and really get them to own this. I remember a long time ago when Dick Lugar was trying to make a city-county government. He did that. He went out into all the little nooks and crannies of Indianapolis and Marion County and got people to buy into it. So when it came up 2 years later, it was a slam dunk proposal. And I think that's what we need to really do. We've got to allow time for this to build interest and not rush into it. If we slapped a plan out there, expect people to buy into it, we're, what, more than 18 months away. 2 years, more than 2 years away. I mean, I can't even, not sure it would be successful. But I think this will allow us to build a successful campaign, allowing us to brand it, take into account all the different, wait to see if green light passes. That's going to be, I think, an important element. I think bringing in, when you do the branding campaign, someone who's an expert in transportation, allow us to do this people-centric proposal, kind of like, the people that did the Envision campaign for the mayor.
Right.
They took that thing out. They had drawing workshops, design workshops. They had, and they layered it into a series of things. And I think you're laying out a really good time. I think the timing's going to be critical, but you're laying out a well thought out process of how we can engage and how we as commissioners and elected officials can go out to our constituents and also engage in that conversation, because we've got plenty of time before any ballot initiative, if there is one, would be developed. And I think every step, we can't let a day go by without doing something on this, without some public engagement, whether it be social media or some campaign, whatever we want to do. But I do think it's very important what you said, do it right and get it done. It's going to be the most important elements of this plan, is doing that. So I hope that we'll continue with the stakeholder meetings. I know you're doing quite a bit now to engage the public, but I know we have a busy election season coming up and after the primaries are over, and I hope that just all of next year, 2015, will be spent really taking this out and letting this be the people's plan. So good job. Thank you. Good effort.
I'd like to walk you through what we're going to call phase one. And our concept in this is we'd like to go out, do some intensive stuff, and then ask you to come back and meet with us so that you can share what you're hearing from the community, we can share what we've heard, and then jointly we will design phase two, which may be. So what we're trying to do is go out and listen to the public, understand what they see as the need, understand how they value these investments. We want to understand their willingness to make major investments. And in sum, what we're trying to do is to understand the needs, aspirations, and values of the community. Because for you to be effective leaders on that, you have to be aligned with those needs, aspirations, and values. So that's the intent of this effort. There are a number of conversation points we want to have. We want to talk about safety. We talk about protecting the existing assets that you've invested in. reducing commute times, providing broader choices, transportation choices, connecting jobs and people, connecting freight and customers, and the whole concept of equity, that if it's a broad, widely shared tax, everybody needs to benefit. So those are the conversation points that we want to have with the community as we go out. There are a variety of publics that we're going to engage in. We need to engage in a number of the participating agencies here and understand their leadership understands what we're talking about. We have anchor institutions such as the University of South Florida, University of Tampa, et cetera. We want to ensure their input, their concerns, we've heard from them. There are a number of groups in this community concerned with economic development, Tampa Bay Partnership, Greater Tampa Chamber, et cetera. We want to ensure that this is responsive to where they see their businesses are and where they're going. And in the very early parts of this process, you heard from some of those folks. There are a number of trade associations that we need to meet with and various transportation interest groups. You've got your neighborhood associations. And ultimately, we're trying to reach all the residents. But in our first phase, we really want to make sure we get out to those folks who have some sort of leadership responsibility so that they understand what we're talking about, as well as get to those folks who have busy lives, you know, and they're concerned with getting to work and getting their kids to school and to the doctor and all that stuff, so we can understand their needs. So that's the folks we'll be reaching out to. This is a variety of tactics. Mr. Merrill reviewed them with you. The only one I would talk about very briefly is you have a number of transportation committees in this community who are working on it. We want to get all those folks together in a room and talk about this so that they can understand their work and what they've done and how it fits in and how this moves. So what you'll see is a wide variety of outreach here. And I will say it even though it goes without saying, you're welcome to participate in any of this you wish to. We would love to have your participation. One of our concerns is we want to make sure we have a uniformity and consistency of message. This is a very large and complex process and project. It's easy to misunderstand, misinterpret. So we want to, one of the things we will do is we're going to have training sessions for everybody who agrees to speak so that we have the same message. We'll have frequently asked questions so we can have consistent responses. We'll have coordinated websites. You know, we want to ensure we're sending the same message wherever we're at. Now, obviously, it's locally adapted in terms of specific projects or something, but we want to make sure we're sending a consistent message. Our first phase is to try to aggressive, and we want to go out and be prepared after Labor Day to start the conversations and to have those through September and the first parts of October. Depending upon your schedules and availability, we would like to meet again with you late October, early November. You're obviously going to get a lot of feedback in this process. You'll hear from folks. We'll have heard a lot of stuff. We'd like to then talk with you about what you think is reasonable for phase 2, if there is indeed a phase 2. There are a lot of options for that, but we'd like to go out and get some in-depth experience and understanding before we design a further process. So if you will consider this as phase 2. In that line, we will, with your permission, we will cancel the September meeting of this body, and we will move back the October meeting to a date later in October, early November, whatever we can negotiate on your schedules. If you wish to meet, we'll be happy to do that, but at this point, we think it's probably more productive for your time and our time for us to be out working in the community on these various projects. So that's the schedule we'd like to adhere to. We do have a communication groups, which represents the communication officers of all your entities. We meet every Friday, and this Friday morning we will develop a detailed work plan if you have given us the permission to go forward today. So, Commissioner Miller.
Let me get a clarification. I
Sure.
think that everyone is going to get a clarification. You've got material development scheduling in August. You've got briefings in August through October.
Yes, sir.
Open houses late September, October. What exactly are you going to be presenting? Are you presenting this proposal that we have planned? What exactly
Sure.
will we be presenting?
Well, we're presenting part of what Mr. Merrill showed you today in terms of, this is the high level. We have for each area of the county, we can talk about specific projects in those areas, if those are their concerns. We can talk in depth about any of the other materials. Mr. Merrill, would you like to reply?
Let me just kind of weigh in on that. I think, you know, what we're really talking about is bringing back to you in October the results of the conversation. No conclusions, no asking for any votes. It's a short period of time. It's 6 to 8 weeks. It's not a lot of time. So it's kind of just bringing back, let you know what we heard, getting your direction on going forward with additional public engagement. So that's really what we're trying to accomplish in this short window.
Do we have a number of community meetings, whether they're with any community homeowners associations, civic groups? Have we looked at where we'll be going and who we'll be talking to? I mean,
We have all that preliminarily identified. We obviously, since we don't have your permission to proceed yet, have not begun any scheduling of that. But each of the member organizations has their list of community organizations. So we have that identified, and we'll begin working on that this Friday if we get your permission to go forward.
and if we get that permission, will you be sharing that with us so we can make sure?
Absolutely. We will send you our list and ask you to add to it. Since
Well, my concern is that we're talking about a 60-day span, if I'm figuring this out right. And it's going to be awfully difficult to hit every nook and cranny within 60 days to try to get the message out and hear what people have to say.
we don't pretend we can get to every nook and cranny in 60 days. What we did want to do is try to get out far enough to be able to start to hear some themes and concerns. And at that same time, we believe people will start talking to you all about that. Then we'd like to meet with you again, hear what you've heard, we can share what we have, and develop a more longer-term plan that would take to cover this entire county.
And then go back out to the.
Yeah, go back out again. So this is why we're calling Phase 1. Let's go out there, let's hear some things, ask some questions. We believe you'll get a lot of feedback in that process. Then let's come together, talk about it, and jointly propose a Phase 2.
We want to make sure everything is crystal clear, because in 2000, then everything wasn't crystal clear.
Right.
It was very muddy, and that's what happened to it.
Okay.
And if we want to make sure that all the work that's been going on for the last year and a half is put into place, we can come up with a plan that everyone can adhere to and adjust to and love and vote for, hopefully, if we get to that point. We want to make sure it's crystal clear, because if we don't, we're doomed to fail.
Sure.
We don't want that to happen.
And let me build upon Mr. Merrill's comments. You know, we're not going out there trying to do a sell at this point.
No,
We're
not at
asking,
all.
but we're just trying to hear. And part of hearing will make that message clear. You know, we said this and people thought we were saying this. We used this term and they didn't understand it. So a whole part of that is getting our message very sharpened and clear.
You understand, I'm not talking about a sale.
I understand.
I'm talking
Yes,
about
sir.
hearing what the people have to say.
Yes, sir.
That's
That's
the-
what we want to do. But part of getting it clear is understanding very fully what they're saying.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Commissioner Begner.
When you talk about going out and having a conversation with people, how are we documenting or how are we measuring the conversation that we're having? In other words, are we having some type of a survey instrument that we're taking? How are we going to record all this?
We haven't finalized it yet, but we have developed a draft sort of mini survey card that as we have conversations, people could rate us, give us feedback. Each of these forms are somewhat different, so you'll get the feedback. We definitely want to, one, get the feedback, and two, document it in a way that we can organize it. Say, here are the themes we heard, comes up consistently here, or whatever. So we will not do, in this phase, we're not doing a formal scientific survey. We're doing more qualitative surveying.
I think one of the other things that I know has been expressed by some of the members and really is a question for you is that, you know, we're thinking we should really engage someone to assist us with this, someone in the private sector who does this work for a living. Again, we're not selling anything, but we want to bring something back to you that's going to be useful to you. So one option would be for us to engage someone to help us put together the kind of specifics that you're asking for. But that's up to you.
So, and I know we had conversations in the past when we were going to be going out and engaging the public. Are you going out talking about the specific project lists that is starting to be circulated, or are we going back to talking more generalities about what their thoughts and the concepts, what they have, what the multimodal transportation might mean to the public?
Yeah, it's a more generic conversation. And the difference now is that, you know, there are ideas. I mean, there's more information so that folks know, for example, now they know what they didn't know before about our repaving backlog. I mean, that's a pretty important fact, or about safety projects. So as we talk, have a conversation generically about how they feel about transportation needs, at least it's bracketed, or at least there's a context now. It's not just, you know, well, do you like buses? Do you like, roads? I mean, it's grounded in something a little bit more factual, because the projects came from all the cities and the county and from Hart. And so it really is a good cross-section of what we think the needs are. We didn't, we didn't draw a line and say we're only think we should do these projects. It's a really an unfiltered list, in the sense that it's all out there. I know some people maybe don't like that. They think we should have somehow come up with a balance, but I mean, that's not fair. It's not helpful to people unless they can kind of see what's out there. What haven't we been able to do? And Lucia and I had a meeting at South County South Shore Roundtable last week, and it was kind of our first opportunity to have that conversation, and it was a very good conversation. We didn't talk a lot about specific projects, but it sure was helpful to them to be able to see, what is this problem we're talking about? I mean, it's kind of almost the conversation is, what is the problem? And how can we describe the problem? Well, you can describe it by saying, if you have potholes on your streets and it's damaging your automobiles, that's because we have $745 million countywide in repaving backlogs. Why do we have the number of bicycle and pedestrian injuries and deaths that we do? Because here are the sidewalk projects. Here are the other projects that we think you should know about, process, feedback to us.
So it's really about defining in the public's minds and their perception of what the problem is with transportation or transit system. Is contrary to what some may think, I still categorize roads as part of our transit system. It all interconnects together. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're going to be collecting feedback on what are the problems or perceived problems in some of the different parts of the areas, and that's what we'll be.
And the problems are different in different areas. It's a large county, and to your point, the thing we heard at the South Shore Roundtable was, yes, we need road expansions because we want to be able to get to an extended BRT that's going to come down so that we can travel. So yes, it's absolutely connected.
Well, and I think that's the right way to start, because I think part of the problem we had before with the other referendum is we put out projects or products before we defined really what the problems were and what the potential solutions were. So I think that this is certainly the right way to start the conversation, is to fully understand in the public's mind and go out there and listen to them as far as in their community what these different problem areas are. When would you perceive then that as far as the proposed projects would be? I guess you would come back and we look at what the feedback from the public were, and then perhaps then start proposing some of the different projects as the solutions to the problems presented.
I think that's in the second phase. And the first phase, I mean, we're not saying October is some sort of deadline. All we're saying is we're going to come back to you in October and let you know what we heard. We just got to keep doing this until everyone's satisfied. And if we're not ready to talk about projects, we don't want to talk about projects. But at least, as I said, there's something out there for people to look at. And so far we think people have found that helpful.
I would qualify that by saying until a large majority have said the same message over again. If you try to satisfy everybody, I think we'll be going on for decades.
Yes, absolutely.
Been going
realize
for
that.
decades.
That was Pollyannish of me, I'm sorry.
And just finally, we will get an outline of what that presentation will look like. When did you say? Or when was it projected that we would know what?
We'll begin developing, well, we have a lot of materials developed, but we'll begin formalizing that this Friday with the communications work group. Then we'll issue an invitation to any of those of you who wish to engage and join us in presentations. We will set up multiple just training and review sessions so that we can all go through the materials, practice, ensure we're all giving the same message. So that will probably occur later August or very first week of September.
Okay, thank you.
Again, we'll work with your schedule. Commissioner Hagan, I believe.
Commissioner Hagan.
Well, I want to touch on something that Mr. Merrill just alluded to. And I frankly think that it would be prudent for us to engage someone in the private sector to assist us in this process. I feel that there would be value in utilizing someone who is a transportation expert or someone that has a transportation background. I think this would provide significant benefits. When do you have a recommendation, or what are your thoughts, either Herb or Mike, on when we can engage someone like that?
Well, we didn't want to start that process until we had some buy-in from you that was something you felt was appropriate. I think as we did the last time when we selected a polling firm, we would, want to get some of your feedback, and we want the right person, and we do a lot of things well on my staff, but this isn't one of the things that we do. It's not our expertise. I mean, we have good communications people, but this is a specialty, and so, my ego's not invested in this part of it, but I think we just need to get some ideas of who we think are the right people. It can be done quickly. I mean, we can do a contract PO and get someone engaged, so.
Well, you're absolutely right in that this type of exercise is not any of our expertise. And I fully support going in that direction. I want to hear what the other colleagues have and their thoughts on it. But I'd fully support doing that. Other thing I want to touch on briefly is something Commissioner Miller touched on, and I understand wanting to provide feedback to this board on what you're hearing in the public. However, I do not want us to operate on any self-imposed deadlines or timelines that would or could potentially negatively impact the initiative. So understand wanting to come back, give us an update, but let's don't have any self-imposed timeline that could potentially,
We'll be in
hurt the
discussions
initiative.
with you about when you feel it's an appropriate time to do it. We always like to put an aggressive schedule out rather than give you a slow schedule, but we certainly would do that. And I'll come back when I ask for direction to talk about the lead private sector person. I'll come back
Thank you.
to it. Mayor Lott?
Thank you. Just to add on a little bit of what a couple of comments and that Commissioner Beckner mentioned a while ago is that when he was talking about measuring, this is just a quick note. The MPO and their Envision 2040 program, when they've gone out to the public, they've used the texting model where everyone is able to text a response during the meeting, and at the end of the meeting, they're able to share the results. And it's quite fascinating, and it includes everyone. So I'm not sure if that's a good measurement or not, but if you haven't participated in it, just the audience involvement in that I think has been very, very key in what the MPO has done with it, and I applaud them for that. So it might be something you want to consider.
Yes, sir.
I think it's very dangerous when we go out to the public and have lines on a map, okay? And so I hope what I'm hearing from all the commissioners that I've heard from so far today is that in the presentations we're not going out with lines on a map. Because as soon as you put a line on a map, believe that's, why is that happening and not this happening, okay? Before they've had a chance to express their desires, their concerns, their feelings, their emotions, and so forth. So, I hear that we're going out and we're listening and so forth, but I'm already seeing things, pop up that are lines on maps and projects that are quoted. And I know at some point we have to have that, but I think that I think it's very dangerous to go out in meetings when I can tell you, I think all of us would like to discuss these lines that we see. Are these the right ones? Does it fit in our budgets and so forth? To add on to that, I think there needs to be, before these lines on the maps are created, there has to be some more coordinating going on between the cities and the county. Because there are roads that are obviously intertwined between all of us, and who's paying what? Is the city paying for this portion, the county paying for this portion? If it's important to the city, is it important to the county? Okay. So I think that if we're going to start putting those lines on the map, I know in our case, we'd like to have some more, and we've had lots of meetings, but just the meetings just focused on projects that are interworking projects between each other, And I think one of the biggest things I'm glad to see in this plan is the resurfacing. I think all of us know that one of our biggest assets we have in any city is your road and your infrastructure and so forth, and I think none of us are earning an A in taking care of this asset. I think we all are getting a D or an F in that regard, okay? I know 4 or 5 years ago we were looking at it, and our budget had us resurfacing our roads in Plant City on a 75 to 85-year range when a road's supposed to last about 25 years. I call that an F, okay? We're now have a budget to do it every 25 years, but we're still 100 years behind. So by the time we catch up, we're in the same hole. So unless we have some mechanism to catch up that backlog, we never will be able to, take care of one of the most valuable assets in our city. So I'm very glad to see that piece on there. And that's not a line on the road. That's just taking care of the assets we have. So I'm very happy with that. And that's it, thank you.
It's Commissioner Higginbotham, then the mayor, and then Mr. Merman. Okay. Mr. Higginbotham.
That was one of the fallacies we had last time that I spoke about too, was the lines on a road. And I see, as I've read through this AECOM report, that I think it was Mr. Merrill who said, rather than just say we have traffic jams, let's outline what those problems are, so as the public is engaged and engaging themselves as well, they can look at this report and say, this gives us a direction and outline. And that, as I understand, is what the intent of this AECOM report is. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. It's just an assessment of where the county
Better
is right
assist the
now.
public, but it was not a direction or outline for this
No.
board.
No, sir, not at all.
Okay.
Just an assessment.
Mayor.
Work on.
Couple things, and like Commissioner Merman said, I want to compliment Mr. Merrill. You have put your heart and soul into this for the last 18 months, and we wouldn't be where we are had it not been for your leadership, and you are to be commended. I wholeheartedly support moving forward. I will say that as a predicate. I think it's important that we do this. I think we have taken the time as a body for the first time in decades to really lay out what the scenario is and what the challenges are and the magnitude of the challenges. And I think we all recognize that something has to be done. Explain to me, if you will, the next couple months. You will embark on a process by which you will go out and talk to the community, and I agree with many of the sentiments offered here today that it's going to take a different skill set in order to do that. I think we need to look at this in the context of how that message is developed, how it's executed. It is not something that government does well, and we need to find people who do. And we need to pay them what it takes to do this and do it efficiently. So we're going to spend the next couple months out talking to the various segments of this community about the size of the problem, what the problem is, what the potential solutions are. But ultimately, there's going to have to be a vote of my colleagues from the county as to whether or not this goes on the ballot. Because there is no game to play if there is no election. At what point does that happen? Because for the rest of us, we can't get engaged. We're suited up. We've been training. We're ready to go. We want to hit somebody. But we got to have a game. We got to have a game. I mean, I don't know any other way to play, but full throttle. Yeah, I mean, put me in, Coach. Mr. Merrill, when is the
We're going to put on the pads.
that's, you know, whatever sports analogy we're going to use. Is it anticipated at the end of this period in October that the board would make a decision as to whether or not it goes on the ballot in 2 years, and then we start, you know, the discussion?
That wasn't what I was intending, but again, taking the lead from your comment, there's some things that I don't do well and that we don't do well, and one of them is deciding when it's time to have a referendum. And so that's really, you know, partly what we hear from the public, but largely, you know, it really has to come from you all, the timing and the direction for that. I mean, we can provide the data, you know, how much revenue gets produced and all that good stuff, and Chip and David and others can tell us the legal parameters and so forth, but I did not come here with a predetermined date, really, frankly, looking to your guidance, and until we come back in October, I'm not sure we all know really what that looks like, and didn't even really want to put that on the table today. So.
Well, I mean, I can tell you sooner is better than later. The mechanics of putting on an effort of this magnitude is pretty extensive. And we're going to have a healthy infrastructure around this effort to make it successful. And I think to Mayor Lott's question, one of the reasons it didn't succeed before is because of the lack of specificity. Mm-hmm. And I can recall the Jacksonville effort for, 7, 8 years ago, a Better Jacksonville program, where people in the community knew literally down to their street what the benefit was to them directly, because the plan was that specific in terms of where the improvements are going to be made. And obviously some people aren't going to like those choices. But I think when voters make a decision, when the people that elect us go in that polling booth, they're going to vote their self-interest, and they're going to want to know that the 35 bucks that they're going to pay, or whatever that number is going to have a benefit on their quality of life. And I think that specificity needs to be there when they go into that ballot box, so that somebody in Plant City is going to know that this intersection is going to get fixed, and to them, that decision to spend that extra 35 bucks is a direct impact on their quality of life. So after we get through with this discussion, we've got to be as specific as we possibly can, because when we go to the voters and ask them to vote for this, they're going to want to know what they're getting. They did know in 2010, and they need to know in 2016.
Right. No, and that's exactly what we heard at the South Shore Roundtable. So they did want to know about projects because, you know, and I'm paraphrasing, but they said, you know, we really don't mind rail in the county, but we need something here, and here's what we think we need. And we're going to hear that from everyone. And so with, you know, I hear, Mayor Lott, what you're saying. I think what we weren't trying to draw definitive lines on the maps, but we had to have a starting place. And Mayor Buckhorn's right. At some point, some or all of those projects we've identified may end up in the specific plan, and there'll probably be more added. But I think we're starting from a good place without locking in. So this is the conversation I keep having with people. They keep saying, well, you have a plan, you have a plan. There is no transportation plan. There are options, there are ideas. There's no good way, easy way to start this conversation. Someone had to start it.
We did.
I'll take the hit for it, but you know, asking people just arbitrarily, do they like this or that, without a grounding in some reality, it's not going to give you what you need. It's not going to give them what they need. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the mayor. You know, voters had difficulty last time because of the lack of specificity in the plan. And but I want to ask this question. I know you mentioned earlier that your measurements were going to be quantitative and not scientific. At what point are we going to get scientific, and are we going to be measuring voter attitude? I know that Jim Davis and I had this discussion 4 years ago. I did my own polling, he did his, and there were vast differences between the two. At the end of the day, I was 1 point off, and he was many points off. Are we going to ask the question of the voters? One, would they be willing to vote for a tax for road improvements? Two, would they be willing to vote for a tax for more buses and bus routes? Three, would they be willing to vote for a tax for light rail? And four, would they be willing to vote for a tax for commuter rail? At what point are we going to measure the voters' attitude towards how we're going to fund it?
That's something that we would look to whomever we hire to tell us when the right time is and to help us design it. My sense is that we need to have the conversation about needs, and that will then help clarify and crystallize the kinds of questions you're asking. It's almost like you need to know what renovations you need to do to your house first, and then talk about what you can and can't do, what you don't want to do, and then what it's going to cost and how you're going to pay for it. So, but I think that's truly something we're going to rely on the experts we hire to tell us the timing and help us design the questions with your help.
Well, there's a last question that's going to have to be asked. Once at the end of the day we figured out the exacts of where we're going to get the money to pay for the plan and what the plan is going to cost, would they be willing to vote for a plan that has X number of dollars worth of shortfalls in it?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a significant question that needs to be asked. You know, well, I can't speak for anybody else's district. Everyone, your neighborhoods are all unique. Mm-hmm. But on the north end of the county, where there was a significant negative vote the last time around, the feedback that I got was more than just what's in it for me. Mm-hmm. Is it what's it going to cost, how we're going to pay for it, and you know, those are questions that are going to have to be answered.
And I think that's why once people feel comfortable with a plan, we can start talking about revenues, because depending on what type of projects, you may have more or less federal investment, federal grant money. You may have more or less private payments in the form of user fees like premium tolls and that kind of thing. So it's very elastic, but you need to know what is it that we're actually going to be building before we can get to revenues, I think.
What really concerns me here is, you know, we have an opportunity to advance forward with necessary improvements for transportation. But timing is crucial. We have an opportunity to sit back and watch what Pinellas County does. And if it succeeds, ride on their coattails. If it fails, make the necessary changes so that in 2018 we don't fail, we win. But if we launch this in 2016 and we fail, it's going to be 10 years before we can try it again. And that makes me very nervous. I'm not sure we have enough time to sell this, and I'm not sure we have enough time to really do the legwork that needs to be done to generate the voter buy-in to get this passed. And I'm afraid that in our haste, we're going to put ourselves back 10 years.
Mr. Hagan?
Thank you. A couple comments. One, I'll echo Mayor Buckhorn's remarks in that I too believe sooner is better to move forward. However, there are challenges, particularly legal issues, that require us to be methodical in our planning, such as you're limited in the specific wording and number of words that can be on the actual referendum. We actually approve an ordinance to do that, and while approving the ordinance, does that require the individual projects to be listed? Does the ordinance require the election date? I think we're still unclear on when. Commissioner Chris is saying maybe even 18. Is it 15, 16? And as well as the governance, we're still unclear on that. So, perfect world, sooner is better, but I think there are some specific and critical issues, particularly legal ones, that require us to be methodical and ensure that we get it right. I think a big difference here, unlike in 2010, is that there was a big question back then if the Board of County Commissioners would even place a referendum on the ballot. If you remember, we had a largest public hearing that I've ever been involved in my 12 years out at All People Center, packed house. This time, I think for the most part, most believe that there will be a referendum. May be unclear on the date. It's unlikely that it will be a unanimous vote by the County Commission, but I do not know anyone that does not believe that there are 4 votes on the County Commission to place this referendum on the ballot.
I think it's an excellent start. Having lived through the 2010 effort, and I thought it was an exceptional experience. We made a lot of mistakes. I admit as many of them. I'll carry it on my back. The mistakes that were made, things that we didn't do right, the communication that didn't occur or could have occurred better. But, you know, good grief, you know, life is about making an effort and not being afraid to fail and knowing full well that you might, but then you pick yourself back up and you move, because our competitors aren't sitting still. And those that are consistently ranking ahead of us, and I'm not talking about the San Franciscos and the Chicagos, but talking about communities which we used to measure ourselves against and are consistently top 20, our rankings, and I will give the mayor great credit because we went from 138th in the Milliken rankings for 2012 to 93rd for best performing cities, but daggone it, we're a top 20 best performing community. And there's a relationship between transportation and economic development, and we spent 18 months analyzing our economic development areas and trying to determine where they are and how we might possibly connect. We didn't even get into the mode of connecting them. What we agreed was there is a line between the economic development areas, and it would behoove us to connect them. We've spent 21 years, the AECOM report, which I think is, there's points that, you know, I would disagree with, but there are other points where I agree with them, and I credit the gentleman for his hard work in putting the report together. But it goes back and it looks at 21 years of studies, a total of 9 studies that we've engaged in over a 21-year period. So I don't think we've rushed. I think we've been a little slow in acting. We could wander for 40 years. There are others who've done that, and they still get to where they know they got to go. But we knew full well, and I think the mayor understands this, where ultimately we need to go. Hart just set another record, July, and our chairman here of the Hart is here, and he's done a great job, Mr. Suarez. A total of 1,235,600 trips were taken last month, a record for Hart. But Hart's going to run out of money. And they may well run out of money while we talk and decide on what we're going to do. They could be in the red by 2017, 2018. I know that Ms. Egan's going to do her best to keep us out of the red, and she's done a phenomenal job with our budget. But while our competitors are building and we're having this conversation, I think at some point we're going to have to act. And I would agree with our mayor. We need to suit them up and get them out there and get started. But I will also say that this is a great, I've really enjoyed serving with this board. And each one of you are very thoughtful, smart. Commissioner Hagan, one of the most thorough individuals that I've worked with. He's not going to let us get out ahead of ourselves without being thoroughly prepared. And I absolutely agree with you, Mr. Hagan, that what we need to do is make sure that when we do go forward, that we're ready and that we've done our homework. So I want to thank you, but I want to start building.
We've heard the points you'd like to make sure we consider, and we certainly will do that. We begin the conversation with the public, but we continue the in-depth conversation with you about this as we complete phase one. The issues you've raised today will start to be addressed in phase two. We hear you, Commissioner Hagan. We won't put an artificial deadline. We won't delay either. We'll move forward. I have two questions of you. May we move forward? Just nods will be fine.
Do you need, second?
Okay.
We have a motion which was made by Commissioner Merman. It was seconded by our mayor, Mayor Buckhorn. Would you please take the motion? Would you put the mic on so we can?
That we're going to move forward with public engagement, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, a motion put forward to move forward on our public engagement, again, made by Commissioner Merman, seconded by Mayor Buckhorn. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Okay.
I'd like to offer up a motion or direction, whatever Herb or Mike thinks, that we give you the authority to move forward with engaging someone in the private sector with transportation experience to assist us in this initiative.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Hagan to move forward, and again, that's to hire someone from the private
sector with transportation experience to help to engage us in this initiative.
Okay, and that was seconded by Mayor Buckhorn, and we have some comment. Commissioner Beckner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And obviously, it would be ideal if the company is engaged, knows this community. But I think it's also even more important that we reach out to firms that may have assisted in successful referendums across the country. So let's get somebody that knows what they're doing. And like I said, if they exist in this community, great. If they don't, then let's make sure we just have the best at the table.
Commissioner Higginbotham, sir.
And I want to make sure that when you're engaging this firm, that it's not a public relations firm, that it's someone that has that transportation background.
I can assure you there are people out there who are already saying, and they're transportation people, they're ready to go to work. Anyone else? Any other comments? Okay, did we take the vote? We did not take the vote. Those in favor of the motion made by Commissioner Hagan, seconded by Commissioner Buckhorn, or Mayor Buckhorn, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion
You've been
passed.
suited up, Mayor. You know, 2 roles now. I'm ready.
Love to have him over here.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, great 16 months of work. Thank each of you for your continued participation and contribution to this. Look forward to the next period of work, however long it may be.
Can I just say one more time, though, for the record? Mr. Merrill, you get a lot of praise, and sometimes you get criticism, but I want to say that you're one of the finest administrators that I've worked with, and I want to just thank you for what you and your staff have done, irrespective of where we go, and ultimately what we put forward. You've laid it out there, and it's deeply appreciated.
Yeah. I want to, and I just want to chime in on that too. I was looking for you, Mike.
Thank you.
And I know when post-referendum, I said this has got to be community-driven, and it's got to have input with everyone. And I'm just grateful for the efforts. And let's move to the next step and get the public's input and see where they stand and feel on this.
I appreciate that, and obviously there's just been a whole lot of people who've devoted a lot of their time away from their families. We even had a guy whose wife was pregnant, and so we joked around that she couldn't have the baby till we got to today.
That's one more vote, Mike, come on. What's wrong with you?
See? I don't do this very well,
You
do
got to think like us.
She had the baby. Everything's fine.
There we go,
We're good.
one ahead.
One more.
She only missed by a couple weeks, but I'm telling you, there's a lot of, and everybody here who participated from various staffs, you want to just stand up and consultants and everyone else. I mean, it's not, you know, it's not the whole group, but it certainly is representative.
Hey.
Thank you all for your support.
I just want to say, just from a city person, okay, is that I think there's a whole different level of confidence in the relationship between the city and the county now. The leadership comes from you, but it goes all the way through your entire staff. It's no longer the city versus the county. I really do feel like we sit down together and we work towards a common goal. And I think that would be, you'll see a difference in this referendum because of that as well. So I appreciate your leadership in that respect.
Thank you.
Adjourn. We're adjourned.
Adjourned. Thank you all very much. Thank you.